In this video, we are going to discuss the non-probability samples. We'll talk about the types of probability samples and the non-probability samples. I definitely have two major sampling methods used by investigators to draw samples. And this is based mainly on the use or non-use of random procedure in drawing of the samples. And the two methods are the probability samples and non-probability samples, as I have mentioned. The probability samples in which the method used the random procedures in the selection of the sample elements and is carried out based on chance. And this ensures that every member in the population had an equal chance of being included in the sample. Then we talk about the non-probability samples, which is a method or the technique that does not employ random procedures, and the selection of the sample elements is not based on chance. The use of non-random samples in the medical and health research is not desirable in all situations. And always we have the question of representation of the parent population and the question of generalizability of the findings of the study or the survey. So they are commonly used in qualitative research rather than quantitative research. And the probability samples include simple random sampling and systematic sampling and stratified sampling and cluster sampling and multi-stage sampling. Uh, the non-probability samples include convenience sample, quota samples, and judgment or purposive sample and snowball sample. The non-probability samples, as we have said, that there is an assumption that there is even or uniform distribution of the characteristics within the population. And thus, in non-probability sampling, elements are chosen arbitrarily, and there is no way to estimate the probability of any element being included in the sample. Also, there is no assurance is given that each item has a chance of being included, making it impossible either to estimate the sampling variability or to identify any possible source of bias. Convenience sampling, the first type of non-probability sample, is sometimes referred to as haphazard or accidental sampling, and is not normally representative of the parent population because the sample units are only selected if they can be accessed easily and conveniently. The obvious advantage is that the method is easy to use, but that advantage is greatly offset or removed by the presence of bias. Although useful applications of the technique are limited, it can deliver sometimes accurate results when the population is homogeneous. For example, if we are carrying a study on workplace stress among nursing staff in a tertiary hospital, we might use the convenience sampling by surveying only those staff members available during a specific shift, for example. Then the second type is the quota sampling, which is a non-probability sampling method where the assembled sample has the same proportions of individuals as the entire population with respect to known characteristics or certain phenomena or traits or criteria. For example, a study where the researcher likes to compare the COVID-19 vaccine, for example, hesitancy among the study population of a village, its relationship with gender, age, and socioeconomic status. The researcher first identifies the subgroups based on the gender, based on the age distribution, based on socioeconomic status of the parent population, and then the researcher divides the entire population into subgroups based on the gender, age, and socioeconomic status. Then consider the proportions of these subgroups in the entire population and then samples each subgroup accordingly. When to use the quota sample, the main reason why researchers choose quota samples is that it allows the researchers to sample a subgroup that is of great interest for them to study. And the quota sampling also allows the researcher to observe the relationship between subgroups in the sample. Disadvantages of quota sample, it may appear that this type of sampling method is totally representative of the parent population, but in some cases it is not, as we have to keep in mind that only the selected traits or characteristics of the population were taken into account in forming subgroups at the sample level. In the process of sampling these subgroups, other traits in the sample may be overrepresented. Judgmental or purposive sampling, and this is a non-probability sampling technique where the researcher selects units to be sampled based on their knowledge and professional judgment and expertise. And this type of sampling technique is also known as purposive sampling or associative sampling. When to use judgmental sampling? Judgmental sampling is usually used when a limited number of individuals or expertise possess a trait of interest. It is only a viable sampling technique in obtaining information from a very specific group of people. The two main weaknesses of such sampling are with the authority and the sampling process itself, and both of which pertains to the reliability and the bias that accompanies the sampling technique. The snowball sampling is non-probability sampling technique that is used by researchers to identify potential subjects in studies where subjects are hard to locate. Researchers use the sampling method if sample for the study is very rare or is limited to a very small subgroup of the population. This type of sampling technique works like a care referral. After observing the initial subject or participant, the researcher asks for assistance from this subject to help identify people with similar traits of interest. Advantages of snowball sampling is that the care referral process allows the researcher to reach populations that are difficult to access or to sample when using other sampling methods. The process is cheap, simple, and cost efficient, and such sampling technique needs little planning and fewer workforce for collection of data compared to other sampling methods. The disadvantages of snowball sampling that the researcher has little control over the sampling method, and the subjects that the researcher can obtain rely mainly on the previous subjects that were observed or accessed. Representativeness of the sample is not guaranteed, and the researcher has no idea of the true distribution of the parent population from which the sample is drawn. And sampling bias is also another risk for the researcher when using these sampling methods. This is the end of this video, but next time we'll talk about the probability sample method. Thank you very much.